So hi everyone.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first GlobalXRTalks of 2021. So I'm Saskia Groenewegen, with me Sjoukje Zaal, and behind the scenes our colleague Alexander Myers.
Yeah.
And the last time you've seen us was probably last year at the GlobalXR Bootcamp, our yearly big conference event. So, and we're happy to announce that we already have plans for this year for something similar. We have changed the name because it's not really a bootcamp anymore. It's kind of grown into a conference. So we're calling it now the Global XR Conference. And it will be in November, November 10 to 12, 2021. You can already mark your calendars. And we have a brand new website, globalxrconference.com. And well, last time we decided to be a little bit crazy and try to stay up for 24 hours. So this year we're taking it a bit slower. You know, we're all getting older. So we're going to do it 3 days and then a couple of hours in the evening if you're in Europe, or in the morning if you're in the US, or depending on your time zone, but over 3 days. So, Sjoukje, anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add to that. Yes, we're going to do this for 3 days, and we're very excited. And the last time was a huge success. It went very well. We had a very nice team with all people from the community, and it was really great. And hopefully, we can do that even better the next time.
This time.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's our big news, basically. And then, well, onto the program of today. We have, again, as usual, 2 amazing speakers. So let's bring in our first speaker. There he is, Roel Kooistra.
Hi, good evening.
Welcome.
Hi, Saskia.
So Roel will also introduce himself in a second, but quickly, Roel is the competence lead for Microsoft 365 and Azure development at ShareValue NL, and an expert for SharePoint. Welcome, Roel.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited.
Good to hear. You have an exciting topic as well. Very curious.
Okay, well, maybe should we start with it?
Yeah. Let's just start. Okay. Let's go.
So yeah, welcome everybody with this session with 8 practical tips for designing an engaging user experience in SharePoint Spaces. It's a long title, and the session will mostly be demos. So I have a few slides. I was already introduced. My name is Roel Kooistra, competence lead 365 Azure development. I'm a huge virtual reality enthusiast. I like to try out all the stuff that virtual reality has to offer, and also the mixed reality things. Down here you see my LinkedIn and my Twitter, where you can follow me, and I work at ShareValue. So let's start with a short introduction about SharePoint Spaces. I don't know if everybody knows what it is, but let's start with a small introduction. It was first announced on the North American SharePoint conference in 2018. I was immediately very excited about it. It combined SharePoint and virtual reality into one. 2 of my main goals in my work. And it gives a 360-degree user experience that can be built by the end user themselves. So no longer is it needed to have a whole 3D group of people. You can your end users can make them their own. And since November 2020, it's in general available across the world. On the roadmap, it's still on rolling out, but all the tenants I've seen, it's already there, so you can use it in your enterprise tenants now. Browsers which support WebGL 2 are needed, so Chrome or Edge Chromium are best. Designing for a SharePoint space is quite different because yeah, we used to design websites which are flat. You see 2D content, maybe some 3D images or models on a website. But right now we have a 360-degree canvas, so the user that you're designing something for can look around, he can interact with stuff, and it's a whole different way of approaching the design. Also, you have to take the perspective differences with it, because the user is put inside a space, so he sees stuff around him and he can interact with stuff. Things could be maybe scary or not really good to see. And also there is this weird thing that I'll show you later on between the edit mode and the user mode, because in the edit mode you can actually go up and down and go through the models, and you cannot do that in the user mode. So you have to take that into account. Because you put the users in the middle of a space, like in a small world, you have to think about the story that you want to tell and where they look and how they interact with all your elements that you build. We're going to see it in the demos. So, as I said earlier, this is going to be a demo-heavy session. So, I want to show you the first demo of creating your space and what options you have to create a great space. We create a space just like we create a page, and immediately we are greeted by the choice for a structure. If you want to build a gallery or amphitheater or arch, we'll come back to that later. For now, I will choose the terrace, and I will make a space. So now SharePoint made a space for me. It looks a bit flat on your desktop, but you can look around by dragging your mouse around. And as you can see, it's like a bubble. And I have the disk behind underneath me now because that's the structure I chose. And here we have the space design. And in space design, we can change what we use. And here we can use all the structures again. So we have the gallery, and this one puts a disk just the same as under your feet, but on top of your head. So you get a little bit less screen space from the background. You also have the amphitheater, which creates a swooshing structure through the whole room. And the arch. And as you can see, some structures are more confining than others. Some make it like almost as if you're in a room, and others are really open. The terrace is the most open one, and that's also something that you have to keep in mind when you use these structures. That if you have a functional 360-degree background, like this one, where you want to show the beautiful surroundings with the mountains and the water, then a structure like the amphitheater may not be the best choice. So there's you have to keep that in mind when you're choosing the structures and the background with what your goal is for the space. For the backgrounds, you have all these standard out-of-the-box stock photos where you can look around. These you get from Spaces, so you can use them. But sometimes they're a bit too crowded, and you don't want something like that. So then you can use illustration. And the illustration is already a little less crowded. It's just a few shades. You could use a color. And if you put this together with the amphitheater, I think this is the most structure that has the most stuff around you. You can see the FT is not that bad at going over your 360-degree image, because it's not that important that you see the image. And we have sand dunes. So if your subject in the space is mostly inside the space and not the 360-degree around you, outside of the terrace, then these things could be fine. You also have the color, and there you can just choose any color you want. And this is even less less obtrusive than the other one, so you can actually use this, and then there's nothing to distract the user from the topics that you may want to show. That's something to keep in mind. And the last one is of course, the most fun one, and that is the custom one, where you can upload. Let me upload one. So now we have a functional 360-degree background, I think. It's the University of Rotterdam, shown from the Euromast. And now you see that the amphitheater is a bit where you're up in the sky. You actually want to see everything, or at least most everything. So the terrace is a much more logical choice to take for this kind of space. Of course, it depends on what you build your space for, but as we will see later on in another demo, doing this with the open clouds is a good choice. Let's say that, for instance, we want another custom image. We take this one. So right now we're inside a forest, and forest is a nice background, but maybe your space is to show off some new art, and then maybe the arch or the geodome could be a better choice, because then you have here you have the open space, you can look into the forest, but here you have the more confined space, and maybe you want to put your art on top of the structures, because you can put models straight onto the edge. So yeah, the choice for a structure and a background really comes together when you're creating a space. Now, another thing that is often overlooked, I think, is audio. We come from web, where in Web 1.0 we had audio all over the place with the dancing bananas and audio everywhere. And then we said audio in websites is maybe not the best idea, so maybe we'd have to do that less. But when we're in a space and you put on an audio file, which could be anything, but for instance, in this case, we could put on a nature sound. And you hear birds, and you have really the feeling as if you're in a forest. And that can really add to the immersion of the person that is using your space. And you can change here which ones you want, get some out of the box. You can also put on your own audio file, which plays in a loop in the background. And you can also put in a welcome message, and this one will only play, the welcome message will only play when the user comes into the space. So it's the first time that he opens the space, he enters it, and then there's a welcome message. So say, for instance, that you're building a classroom, you can put on a audio message when the space loads that tells the user that is a classroom for instance, a rocket engine. And you can also take the user through the story of the space by telling them like what models they can see and what the order could be that they look in at the models, because the user, it's a 360-degree experience, so the user can decide himself if he looks left or right. In web, we get the user and we know that they will probably start on top and go down, but here the user can go left and right, so we have to take that into account. And the audio file can add to that if you want to make a educational space. The last thing that you can do for audio also is that you can add audio to models. So let's say, for instance, that we want a model, and we can, this is the Spaces upload screen, and we can choose here if we want to upload something ourselves from a site for OneDrive, or the 3D catalog. And the 3D catalog is actually all 3D models that you get from SharePoint Spaces themselves. These you can just choose and use in your space. Not long ago, I think they added the 3D icons. So let's say I want a sound. So we have a 3D icon for sound. Add that to our space. And make it a little bigger. And we don't want it to stand in front of the forest, so we selected that that's where we want it. Well, we can bind the function to this specific model. Here we get all the model settings, and some of them will come back later on. But right now, for the audio, we want a trigger. So here we have an on trigger already, which says inspect, and we can add more actions. So we can say play audio, upload a audio file from a link. And if I publish the space, then I can look at it as if I'm a user. So I can click it and I see the 3D model. And then down here, I can either shrink it back to where it was, or I can play the sound. So then the sound will start to play. And if I want it differently, I can do that by changing the trigger. I can delete the trigger that was already on there. So I can get this trigger, the inspect trigger, and I can delete it. And the more actions I also delete, because that the more actions is the menu that you see underneath the model when you inspect it. So if we delete this one and we add an action over here and we play audio, then we can choose the audio file and it will play when we click on it straight away. So that's how you can use audio to really enrich your SharePoint space and make the user either feel as if they're in a forest or give them a welcome message or a audio tour through your subject that you want to show. The other thing I want to touch is the use of how you can highlight content in your space, because right now this space is really empty. I only have a background and a structure and one model. But if I go to one of the spaces I created earlier, so this one already has more than the other one. And this could be a lesson about the SpaceX Raptor rocket engine. could be. It's not, of course, but it could be. And well, here you see the engines. They're floating in the air with a little sign with the name of the element in it. Here you see the Raptor engine fuel lines. Here you see the Raptor engine combustion. So here you already see some highlighting of content, and that's this is just the base model, so the user can look at it, turn it around, see all the parts on the model. You can zoom out, you can zoom in, put it back, and I already created a form of highlighting because here I want to show the user the same engine, but this time I want to highlight the fuel line. So now the user can turn it around and he can see the fuel lines, which are made red. So now the highlighting is part of the model. So for this, I didn't actually do something in space. I changed the 3D model, but it's a way how you can in SharePoint Spaces highlight stuff that you really want to stand out. And in the last case, this shows the combustion engine of the whole rocket. And then I have a video, because you can also add videos to your SharePoint space. And yeah, the video is also just floating around, and I can, if I want to, I can put it on the ground, make it lower, and I can also make it bigger. But yeah, I think it looks kind of nice, but a bit messy. I think it's also a bit messy. And Spaces comes with a building functionality that I think is actually quite good to really highlight content that you want to show inside the space, so around you. And that I also created earlier. And this functionality is called Podiums. So you can give all your models and actually all the things that you put in to the space, you can give a podium. So now the engine is shown on top of a podium, and it really highlights this model. So say, for instance, that you want to add some more stuff to this, but it's more like of a background, a nice decoration of your space, not really functional. You can put it in there behind all this stuff, and still your content would be highlighted because those are on the podium, so they are probably the most important parts. So if you want to see how we can add the podium, it's actually quite simple, but let's see. We add another 3D object. And it's that one. So we have the Raptor engine with the combustion engine, and we want to turn it 90 degrees. Down here you have the tools that you can use to quickly manipulate the item, and you can also use the structures around it and drag and pull those to do it. But yeah, usually these are more fine grained, so you can add more detailed sizing and stuff like that. And if you look at them, then you have the radius, so then turning your model on the x-axis, the y-axis, the z-axis, and the size. And over here you have the angle, how it's placed for the user in relation to how he opens the space. So 180 degrees would be directly behind him, and this is the radius inside out. So the lower this number, the closer it gets, the higher, the further it gets. And you can go to almost the edge of the platform. But let's say for this one we want 4. And then we have this, the height. Now the height is, I can go up and down and have it in the air, but I want to show the podium. So here I have the podiums, and it was easy as that. And then we can change how high. Something I still miss on the podiums, which would be nice, is giving it a color, because right now I can only do black podiums, which are also using the shadows. So this is the same podium as this one, but because of the lighting, it shows differently. So that was quite easy to add the podium, and now we have a nice podium to the engine, and I also added a podium to the video. So now the video doesn't look like it's floating in the air, but it's standing on top of something. Another useful thing I think about the podiums is that you can easier combine content that you use for a model. So say for instance I want to add a description to this SpaceX Raptor. I can do a text file, add it over here. And I want to do this SpaceX Raptor sheet. So now it's adding the document. And instead of just floating around like the other one, I can make this be part of the other structure. So I can put it over here. Now it's a bit to the front. So now it's more like a part of the whole model, and because of the podium of the other model, I can place it on top of it, and you immediately see that it's part of that, and it belongs to that particular model. Now, something curious about the documents is that only the first page is shown, and I cannot do anything to go to another page. This is a miss, I think. Should be that you could look at the other pages. The only thing to do now is that you can bookmark it so that you can look it up later in SharePoint, because the document is somewhere in SharePoint. And you can open it in a new tab. But if you do this when you're in virtual reality, then you are pulled out of the space and you're putting to your browser. And so you have to take off your VR helmet and look at the document. It's not that useful yet, but you can make fact sheets for it. For instance, for this one, we add a combustion engine scheme. It's on top of the podium. And with the, you know that you only have one page, so you can make the page really stand out and make like an overview of how the combustion engine would work, and the user can read it. And the user can also with the fast can zoom in and out, so they can go quite close. And in virtuality, it's also good readable. Another thing that you can use to do better to highlight stuff is adding animations. Now, SharePoint Space has some animated objects itself. So if we add a 3D object, a favorite of mine is the plane engine. So make it bigger. So you actually see everything turning and working internally. Now the user can look at it, turn it around, see how the whole inside of the model works. And I think this really shows the power of the 3D models and spaces, because this is a plain engine, but there's also a heart that you can use to show people how it would work. Now these are all models that are part of SharePoint Spaces themselves. But of course, you can add your own 3D models. There are some restrictions in size and file format, but they can contain animations. And with this, you can really build a fine, engaging space for someone to learn. Another topic I want to I think, yeah, there was the first demo. So yeah, we discovered the options of space design using audio and spaces and highlighting important content. And I think with the basics, you can already create great SharePoint spaces. The next demo would be putting the available space in perspective, because yeah, we're designing for virtual reality. That should always be the first priority, that you're creating this for virtual reality. The user can, of course, use it in their desktop, but yeah, I think you really have to put the virtual reality up front. So you have to keep the user's perspective in mind and plan the layout of the space. We're going to look at what we were creating up until now. So with a viewpoint, I mean that I'm in the user mode now, and I can look around. But if I haven't selected anything, I can scroll with my mouse and can try zooming and whatever I want. I can go anywhere. So there's no locomotion in your space, so you cannot run or walk, and you cannot go around stuff at the moment. You can just stand in the middle. And the weird part in this is that if I edit the space, then I'm still in the same space. But if I scroll right now, then all of a sudden I can zoom out to the top of the space, which is great for designing, because now I can play with the layout and say that this should be far more to the edge and make faster changes and more of an overview. But if I'm down here and I've scrolled accidentally a little bit like this, and I'm looking around, I'm putting everything wrong for the user, because the user would be seeing it like this. So far more down. And that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're designing the SharePoint Spaces, because if you accidentally are a little bit higher than normal and the user gets it over here, then your whole experience could be ruined, because the user cannot see the models the way you intended, and the space is less usable. That's also what I meant earlier with that VR should be at the front of your design, because if you're designing this for desktop, it's a whole nother world than the VR, because in VR the user will look around and use its hands and the controllers to get things and interact with your world. Another thing that's a bit that takes a little bit to get used to is your starting point. So if I refresh this, then this is my starting point, and I can change this in the space design. So here if I take a custom 360 degree, I get two sliders here, and I can change the height, but I can also change the rotation set at the starting view. So what you see now is that my design stays the same, but the background turns around. So say for instance that the default was something like this, but this is not what I want to show the user. What I find most important is this part. So then I can set it with the rotation over here. And that's also an important part in the arch, because right now you see that if this would be what I wanted to show, then probably I would have put the window over there. So I can turn it around. And my starting point is somewhere over here now, but I have this nice view in the structure I chose. So you can really play with that and look and keep the user in mind. Another thing to keep in mind with the 360 degree photos that you create or download or buy is that the perspective could be a bit off. I've created my own 360 degree photos, and I noticed that for the space background, you are placed actually a little bit above the photo that you shot. So you're a bit higher, and it could be weird. In outdoors, you don't notice it that much, but when you shoot 360 degree footage indoors, you really see the difference in height. So you have to keep in mind that sometimes you have to take the pictures a bit lower to make them better usable in SharePoint Space. And also in the 360 degree guides, which we will touch later on, the viewpoint there is actually different from the 360 degree backgrounds in the space. So you have to take the photos a little bit lower there also. Actually, sorry, I'm sorry about that. Yes, take the photos at eye height there. So they changed the perspective there to eye height, and here it's a little bit higher. So you lose some detail if you wanted to. Let's say that, for instance, you want the floor to be straight down on the sand. I cannot get over there now because the photo was the perspective is a bit too high. So that's something to keep in mind when you're creating your own 360 degree content. Another thing to keep in mind is the overlapping of models. You can, of course, place your models all around in the space, but you have to also keep in mind that they don't stand in front of each other. And yeah, in that case, the helicopter view is quite nice because then you can see which models are giving the issues. If we go back to the earlier created, so earlier we were busy with this space, which doesn't have much in it now. But if we edit this and we go back to it is somewhere in the side lessons, but it's not picking it up for some reason, so I'm uploading it again. This one, not this one. So we delete it. So right now we're back on the top of the Euromast. We have the sky above us. So let's say that we want to create a aviation space. We can, of course, use a animated model at an earliest stage of aviation. It should be something like the dinosaurs. Did you see that the perspective? I was already up because I added the 3D model. The spaces placed me in a strange perspective. So I zoomed in to be on the perspective of the user. I want this be a little bit higher and stuff. Go around me, but it's easy to forget that you also, because it's 360 degree, you could also just go up and above. So set it with 0 here. Now I look up, and the pterodactyl is flying over me. It's something that I think should not be overlooked. That it's a 360 degree experience, and I have noticed with myself also that you're really fast just doing everything in front of you and forgetting the stuff above you. It could be that your subject doesn't have anything above you, but if it does, like this pterodactyl, then it's really cool for the user that it's flying on top of him over his head. And I was just wondering, you could add more, have like a whole flock of pterodactyls over your head. One thing you have to keep in mind is the user, of course, as I said earlier. But if I would place a 3D object really close to the user, and oh, that's good. Pterodactyl out of the way. Let's say we want a scary space. So, keeping the user in mind, it probably would not be a good idea to put the model straight in the face of the user, but behind his back. So it could be that that's what you're going for, but if a user is wearing his virtual reality helmet and you have like a creepy sound and a creepy background, and the user turns around and he gets that in his face, yeah, it could be scary, and it could be what you're looking for. But if it's not, then it's not a good experience. And experience learns that VR experiences, first VR experience sets the tone for the rest of the VR journey. I think that I covered all the topics that I wanted to use in this demo. Going on to the next demo, keeping your spaces in shape. So you have different users with different hardware, and everyone with a browser can look at it and use it. But yeah, hardware could not be powerful enough to drive it. Microsoft they recommend at least a GeForce 1060 card for 3D models. So putting too much models into one space could be really taxing on your machine. And also there's the case of how do you, if you have multiple models and you want to touch multiple subjects, maybe you have to switch up your space. So I've prepared a demo for that one. And if I look, that's here. So it's the crowded aviation. So I'm an aviation enthusiast that likes to create aviation spaces. So I put there the pterodactyl from earlier, a drone. You already see that it's already getting a bit taxing on the machine, which is quite strong. But yeah, it's already having a bit of issues. So there's no exact number of 3D models that you can have in your space. So yeah, if you want to if you run into this kind of trouble, you want to create more spaces, then there's the case of navigating to another space. You want the user, if there are in spaces, to stay in spaces. So let's see how we can navigate to another space. So let's edit this one and add yet another 3D model, of course, just to see if we can fry the 3D card. We have the 3D icons, and here we have the general icon for going outside to another place. Usually it's another website outside of this domain. So, but yeah, this is we can use this to go to another space. And here we have the on trigger, and it's on inspect. We don't want to inspect it. We want the trigger that we want to link to another space. So I already created the spaces with Podiums. So it's easy as that. I added it to the model and republish it. And of course, here I added the rocket engines, but I want to switch it up and I want to create another one. So I created a space here, and if I click this now and the user clicks it, then we will load into another space, and the user will not be taken out of his existing space and put back in a 2D world where he has to put off his helmet and put it back on. So with this, you can really go from one space to another and build a rich experience with multiple spaces going on multiple subjects. And also it's a way to keep the performance in hand by only adding like 3 or 4 3D models to a space if you know that your users are not using heavy equipment. The last thing I want to show, because I'm running a bit tight on time, so I will be touching on this quickly. No, not the video. The video is a whole other world. What I'm doing. So I'm creating a 360-degree tour. So I add this to here and I upload, and now it wants a whole bunch of images. So I added 7 images, which are uploaded, and putting a editor. And if the user clicks it, he will go to the guided tour, but we're gonna do it in the tour builder. So right now I'm in the tour builder. I can add this. I can set starting locations. So I can say that this is the starting view of the image. This is what it should be. And then I can add stuff to the 360 degrees. So I can link to another image, or I can annotate it with text, images, video, audio, 3D objects. So let's say that we link to this one. Okay, it's fine. And then we navigate, we go to that one. And now we can edit the rest, and like this, you can create a whole experience going through a building, through an office, for the user to create a, for instance, an onboarding experience. Don't forget to, if you use the dots and go through your experience, that you put things back so that the user can always go back through the photos, so that you link back to an image like this. And I think that is what I wanted to cover on the part of the 360-degree guided tours. I think it's an important part of the SharePoint Spaces landscape. It's really easy for the end user to create wonderful 360-degree guided tours. If you want to see more of this, you can find it online. in my other session that I held earlier. I think that was my session. And are there any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Great session. Looks really impressive. I'm a big fan of it. Always have been a big fan of creating all sorts of customizations in SharePoint. I will cover one question right now, and maybe you can take some time afterwards to answer the rest in the chat window because we're a bit over time. But
Okay.
I will pick one question of Yo. Do you also see this being used a lot in real-world solutions or at customers, for instance?
If I see the SharePoint Spaces as customer solutions, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so because well, there are a lot of customers that already have 3D models, for instance, a furniture fabric. They have the models already, so they should. There are tools to create to convert those models into smaller ones that can be used in spaces. But it would be great to have the space to go to your customers and show things like that to your customer in VR so that they can really see how it would look in the real world. And with the 360-degree background, you can make a photo of a shop and make a rack for a shop and put it in a context of where it will be. So I think there are already a lot of real-world enterprise things to do with this.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds really awesome. Okay, thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Okay, yeah. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Anything?